What's big and white, and if it falls out of a tree it's going to kill you? That's right, it's a polar bear. Hello internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie, and in today's video we are revisiting our festive mini zoo, and we are going to be building for the largest land carnivore on the planet, and that is of course the polar bear. Before we get stuck in, I would just like to say a massive thank you for everybody that has kind of held on during this Christmas break. I did intend on releasing a video last week, and the habitat was actually already built, but I just decided to give myself a bit more time off and really enjoy the festive period with my friends and family and stuff, and not put too much pressure on myself to produce a video. So thank you for sticking around. I hope you had a lovely time and enjoyed the new year and all that. Happy New Year, by the way. I hope that this one treats you well. And don't worry, whilst we were in the festive break, I was still playing games, although I somehow feel like the one that I was playing isn't quite appropriate for the channel, as you creative folk may not enjoy it quite as much. So, as some of you may know, the polar bear has an extortionate requirement for land. It needs a lot of space. So what we can see me doing right now is just a bunch of terraforming, carving out a large area, making sure that there's quite a nice sizable swimming area at the front as well, because the idea is that we're going to have a path that goes over the top of the swimming area so you can look down into the habitat. And that way the polar bear won't ever be able to climb out over the top of the fence, because you're a few meters above the surface of the water. Can't climb up there. But also, I guess you could fall in and drown and get eaten by them in the water. So yeah, okay, the safety of this zoo isn't ironed out completely. We just won't talk about it, okay? We'll just move on, act as if though nothing's happened. Yes. But before we continue with this habitat too much more, I would just like to address the fact that we've had a few babies in the park, and those come in the shape of some adorable little cranes from the very first habitat we built, and the amazingly cute reindeer. Somebody did point out in my penguin video that they'd been born and that I should have stopped everything to go and have a look at them, so I thought I would take a second to just show you how damn cute these animals are, because they really are adorable. Back over at the habitat, it's time to start putting in some barriers, and one thing that I knew that I wanted straight away was an underwater viewing gallery, because everybody loves getting the chance to see semi-aquatic animals having a good swim, and that's one of the things the polar bears like to do the most. So you can see I've reserved this area for a bit of glass. That's what I'm going to use, just normal glass. We're not going to go one way or anything too fancy, and I'm going to put it up as high as possible. Now this does take quite a bit of rejigging over where the two paths meet, that T-section that we can see right here. There's a load of things that I need to shuffle about here in order to get it to go any higher. But once we do, we can lock in our water pretty nicely and allow us a really nice viewing gallery as well. As for the rest of the habitat, it's going to be made out of null barriers, and unsurprisingly we are going to grab a bunch of faux rocks and we're going to create the majority of the perimeter using that. We really want a nice, authentic, natural looking barrier to these habitats. I've done it for most of them, except for, I guess, the reindeer. That was very much a barn, like pretty heavily inspired to look like it's on a farm, which is the entire point, so it's alright, it's theming, isn't it? But yeah, we're going for a more natural look on this one, just like with the previous two habitats we built for the seals and the penguins, and right near the beginning with the snow leopard as well. I really like the use of these faux rocks. I think this light sandy colour looks really nice in amongst all the snow. As you can see, some of it is floating here, but that's pretty easy to fix. We'll just adjust the height and continue to copy and paste around. Normally I might consider changing up some of the rocks in this barrier, and if you're doing this kind of thing, feel free to do so, just to make sure that it doesn't look so copy and pasted, because it is pretty obvious what you've done. However, I decide not to bother, because no one's going to go around and look at the back of this habitat. You're only really going to be viewing it from the front, and from the front these repetitions won't be too visible, and this is also just a mini project I'm doing. It's not a full-scale zoo where I'm putting in loads and loads of effort. This is something more for fun and something to kind of just wind down and relax with. So I'm not going to take things too seriously, and I'm going to allow myself a few little liberties here and there. Having placed all these barriers made of faux rocks, the glass barrier just looked really out of place. It looked way too kind of just stuck in there. Like, it doesn't look very natural at all. So what I've decided to do is use some of the stalactite pieces and some of the thinner rock pieces as well, just to line the top of this glass barrier. I can also cover up the poles that hold these windows together and just make it more of a natural looking environment. Blend it into the rest of the habitat a bit more, and it's really good for making the entire thing look a lot more finished. Now, of course, it's time to hop inside the habitat and start to decorate it for our wonderful new residents. And to begin with, we're going to start by placing all of our enrichment items. Now, the food enrichment is going to be pretty important, as I want the underwater feeding to be very viewable from our underwater viewing gallery. As for the rest of the food feeders, obviously they're food feeders, what else are they going to feed? Yeah, that was unnecessary, wasn't it? Food feeders. Sorry, tangent. As for the rest of the feeders, they are also going to be quite directed towards the front so that our guests get the best view of our animals when they are using these specific items. What you can see me doing right now is placing a massive crashed Viking ship. This is one of the blueprints that comes with the Arctic pack, and I knew that I wanted to use it in this habitat. Basically, from the moment I opened up the Arctic pack, I was like, yeah, this polar bear, they are definitely going to have a massive Viking ship in their habitat. They also have like a weird icy temple, which I decided not to use, but this lovely kind of pride rock, at least that's what it makes me think of from the Lion King, with a lovely polar bear sculpture at the top, that's going to be kind of bearing over the top of our guests as they go up towards the polar bear habitat. I think it's a lovely way of kind of indicating what habitat you're walking towards without just screaming polar bear everywhere with signs and stuff. Instead, it's a little bit more subtle, and you kind of have to be looking where you're going in order to notice it. Speaking of shelter for these animals, I'm going to be using another blueprint from the Arctic pack, and that is the Arctic shelter. I believe it's 8x4. These are these lovely little wooden facades that you could pop anything in, really. I have used them in my staff village as well to disguise the power supply and the water treatment area. I think they work really nicely. So we're just going to pop 2 of these in. Kind of giving the polar bears a house each, because we're going to have 2 polar bears in here. We want to have a mating couple, so that is the idea. And these also come with a couple torches on the front, which is wonderful, because we're going to need to try and light up the back portion of this habitat a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit, in order to give it a bit of atmosphere and make sure the guests can see ever so slightly what's going on if they decide to break in at night, which I hope they don't, but there's every chance. Next up, we're going to move on to placing our foliage, and I'll admit I was a bit of a moron here. I completely forgot to check their coverage needs. I just assumed that they wouldn't really want any plant life, so from the get-go I was trying to do as much rock work as I possibly could. I did what I did in the crane episode, where I used a bunch of the flat white snowy rocks and just kind of scattered them about the edge of the water to make it look like broken ice drifting off and all that. I love this effect. I think it's really cool, and I was going to do it regardless, but I put a lot of emphasis on it, mainly because I didn't think we could have that many plants. We can. These guys love plants, which is really surprising. So after doing all this rock work, we will move on to some plant life, and we can make this habitat look extra special. But before we get there, we have got to finish with the rock work, and of course I have kind of been neglecting the festive part of this zoo. It's just been snowy, hasn't it? I've done the odd Christmas decoration here and there, but in this habitat we're going to pop down a couple trees, a bunch of presents, and some reindeer kind of woven statues and stuff as well. We're going to try and drive it home a little bit more on this habitat in particular. We might even add a wreath to their houses. Yeah, there's a lot of decorating going on, and then we're going to move on to the plants and stuff. So it's about now that I will stop talking for a little bit, put it in time lapse, and you can enjoy Floki popping up to give you a nice fact, and we'll be back in a bit to talk just a little bit more. And with the plant life complete, we can start to move on to some slightly more guest orientated things for this habitat. And just before we do, I would like to point out that I am absolutely loving doing underwater plant design. I didn't expect to enjoy it so much, but doing it for these polar bears was a ball. I really enjoyed it, using the different heights of rocks and stuff, and making sure we had variation in the types of plant underwater. Really helped to create a lovely, lush looking underwater area, which I'm super happy with. Now what we're doing up here is we are creating a barrier to ensure that our guests don't fall in, like I said earlier. I know I joke, but I don't want them being savaged by polar bears. That's not good for business. So what we're doing is we are using the ice blocks to cover the edges of this raised platform that hangs perilously over the water, and then we're going to use an Arctic fence, which is very I'm just going to describe it as Norse looking because that's what all of it looks like, isn't it? It's a nice wooden carved fence. We're going to pop that on top as well, just to give it a bit of extra height and to ensure that people are less likely to climb over. Now we are taking these precautions, and you may be thinking, okay, so he's finally wised up, he's going to start looking after his guests. Are we going to put heaters in the floors? No, we're not. We are going to maintain the fact that there is ice and snow all over the ground. I really hope that our people have insurance, because there are going to be a lot of broken arms in this zoo. Going up all of these stairs with loads of snow and ice is great. Here in the UK right now we have a weather warning for snow and ice, and I am hoping that people are affected in my zoo how I'm expecting to be affected over the coming days. I need to shut up, I am rambling way too much. Whilst our guests are up here, they might want to learn something about the animals as well, and that gap in the post really annoys me. The fencing just has a random gap in it. So we're going to install a lovely wooden carved post, and from that we're going to have our display board that is going to be educating our guests on the wonderful polar bears. We're also going to make sure that our guests can give some money. I hope they give generously, because these polar bears are going to require a lot of food. So we're going to put one of our donation bins with the penguin statue over the top of it up here as well as down by the underwater viewing gallery. As a final touch of this habitat, in order to blend it in with the rest of the surroundings, we're going to use a bunch of faux rocks around the path that leads down to the underwater viewing gallery to try and enclose it a little bit and make sure that it blends into the rest of the habitat, because at that moment the path was looking a little strange, out of place, and it just did not make much sense. So we're using a bunch of faux rocks to tie it in with what we've already done and to further push that idea that this is quite a natural looking area. Now of course this habitat is really big and it's kind of just tacked on the end of this zoo, and it looks a little bit ugly. So a really simple way to blend it in and help to kind of fade out from the zoo, I guess, is to use some trees. We're going to use the ones that are already here when we first started up the zoo, the really tall bright green ones, and make a kind of forest surrounding the perimeter of this habitat and starting to blend it into the edges of the zoo already, like that are already there. That's going to kind of create a really finished look to this whole area. And with that, this habitat is done. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you for having watched it. Happy New Year to all of you, and I'm really looking forward to doing more videos on the channel pretty soon. I think we've only got maybe 2 left in this series. I know we've overrun. We're going from December into January. How atrocious. But we have still got to include the Arctic fox because they're just too cute, and I have the idea that this zoo is going to be one of the loudest in the world, because we already have the cranes, which are super loud, we have the seals and the penguins, both of those are really loud, and from the beginning I wanted to have the Arctic fox because they just scream all the time. So no matter where you are in a zoo, your ears will be bleeding. That is the intention. So yes, thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. If you're not already, subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this appearing in your subscription feed. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.